Thanks, sir. Calling the meeting to order. Well, welcome back. This public hearing has been called to discuss docks across beaches. Okay, this public hearing is being convened in order to receive submissions from the public regarding proposed land use bylaw number 57, amendment number 466, 2018. Anyone who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. Any person who wishes to present a written submission to council may do so, and all written submissions must be received by council before the close of this hearing and presented to the minute taker. If a member of the public wishes to address council, they will be asked to sign the speaker's list and should begin by clearly stating their name and address for the record. Comments should be related to the subject bylaw and be directed to council. Members of council may ask questions to seek clarification following your presentation on points raised. However, the main function of the council members is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council members to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. Those documents are available for viewing during this hearing. Your only opportunity to comment on the proposed bylaws is during this hearing, as members of council may not receive further submissions, verbal or in writing, after the close of this hearing. Council can determine when the proposed bylaws will be scheduled for consideration, and council may either adopt or defeat the bylaws, or alter and then adopt the bylaws, provided that the alteration does not alter the use, increase the density, or, without the owner's consent, decrease the density of any area from that originally specified in the bylaw. Okay, how many do we have, Tyler?
We have three.
Three. Okay, excellent. Oh yes, Daniel.
Okay, so public hearing tonight for bylaw number 466, the WG Water General 1 Zone Amendment. So council is considering changes to the WG1 zone in the land use bylaw. The proposed changes would create an additional requirement that any community dock, private moorage facility, or group moorage facility be located such that they would not physically divide a beach, limit or restrict public use of beach, or negatively impact eelgrass beds or patches. So it's not very readable, but the WG1 zone is the water zone extending from the high water mark out 300 meters for the vast majority of Bowen's coastline, other than some zones within Snug Cove. Currently, the Water General 1 zone says any dock be located such that it will not impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the foreshore or negatively impact eelgrass meadows, kelp beds, clam beds, or mussel beds. And what's proposed is that that wording be amended so that it would read that any dock in this category be located such that it will not physically divide a beach, impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the foreshore, so that remains from the original bylaw. Limit or restrict public use of beach, negatively impact eelgrass meadows, beds, or patches, or negatively impact kelp beds, clam beds, or mussel beds. So some of the backgrounds: this was included in the Island Plan 2018, protect the shoreline to continue work on dock regulations by drafting a bylaw that maps where docks are permitted. So in April this year, council instructed staff to begin preparation of the bylaw to amend land use bylaw to prohibit dock construction across beaches, recreational foreshore, and adjacent to public accesses to the ocean. And then in July, staff brought bylaw 466 to council, which council read the first time, and at that point directed staff to undertake referrals and report back to council. And in September of this year, council made an amendment to the bylaw to include that language for eelgrass meadows, beds, or patches. They then at that point read the bylaw a second time and referred the bylaw to a public hearing. The APC considered this at the meeting of September 17th. They recommended the bylaw 466 not go forward as proposed, but rather that the existing wording bylaw in the land use bylaws remain, but with the addition of the proposed amendment to the eelgrass beds or patches. And the APC recommended council direct staff to identify specific beaches on Bowen that are not appropriate for dock construction. The Islands Trust considered this at their August 15th meeting, and they said that the bylaws are not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. At the time of the writing, there were 8 letters received, included in the public hearing package.
Thank you. Okay.
First up, we have Mr. Wolfgang Dunst. Please state your name and your address.
Wolfgang Dunst, 1149 Middle Road, Bowen.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor, as much as I sympathize with the intent of the bylaw, and I think I know the concerns about docks and on beaches, and as a matter of fact, about 5 or 6 years when I was serving on council, we spent a lot of time walking, inspecting all beaches around Bowen Island. It was quite revealing. And the findings which we had at that time have remained the same. And that's where I have my problem in regard to the proposed bylaw. To just refer to a beach is highly arbitrary, because for some people, any area which falls dry on a low tide, doesn't really matter if it's an extreme low tide, medium tide, or a normal tide, is considered a beach. So there is virtually on Bowen Island very few areas which would not support the notion that there is a beach, unless you have a sheer cliff, and those sheer cliffs are commonly or normally hardly suitable to allow the construction of a dock or landing facilities. So if any such bylaw restricting the construction of docks, then they should identify those beaches which should be protected, not just arbitrary as a beach, because that is too arbitrary and too much subject to interpretation. What is a beach for me or for you may not be a beach for even an environmental assessor or for an engineer or somebody who as a profession builds docks. So that's why I see a major problem in the future to actually allow even desirable docks. And I'm coming to a very personal problem I have. We have applied several years ago to build a dock on Seymour Bay, which we understood is actually in compliance with provisions of the OCP, which encourage to have additional landing facilities. We have right now with an engineering company in North Vancouver, NHC, a very elaborate engineering proposal in the works to apply for that dock. And it will be a very expensive dock, and we will probably or for sure not build such a dock other than in the context of a rezoning for the area. Our intent is such that, again, in compliance with the recommendations of the OCP, that Bowen Island should probably have at least one alternative landing facility for, even if it's not for vehicular transportation, but primarily for pedestrian transportation. The dock itself, initial calculations will be in the range anywhere between $750,000 and $1.5 million. Plus, you will not build such a dock without having at least 1 or 2 passenger vessels, probably the size of a larger, what we call now, or water taxis, but a number up there. So, putting that in question, we would wonder how much our rezoning proposal for this whole area of Seymour Landing makes sense, And secondly, how will pressing issues and concerns right now about alternative access points and alternative ways of commuting transportation between the mainland and Bowen Island can be solved? I'm not aware of any other suitable landing facilities on the east side of Bowen Island. There's only one Snuck Cove, and that is well in use. For any transportation link to downtown Vancouver, Seymour Bay seems, in our opinion, the only logical and reasonable access point. So, what I would like you to consider, A, to be very specific in the beach areas you feel should not be impeded by a dock. And there I sympathize with you. I live above a beach and I would hate to see somebody building across the beach a dock. However, in areas which are A, the only ones, and in not only compliance, but logic would dictate to be actually helpful or initiated the construction of such a facility, that you would put that into doubt. And the doubt is already, if I look at our engineering costs so far, we are close to $50,000 right now, and that's just the beginning. So I don't want to spend any more money on that without knowing, is that approvable or not? Because it still has to go through a whole lot of approval processes. So that uncertainty alarms me, and not only that, it puts question marks as to the character of our rezoning proposal. And the rezoning proposal is such that that traffic link would be crucial for not only our own development, but for giving foot passengers coming from Blue Water, Sealy Park, Tunstall Bay, from the whole west and south side of Bowen Island, those who want to commute to downtown give a chance to take advantage of that service. And to provide that service costs a lot of money, which you don't want to be put in jeopardy because of uncertainty. So whatever the fate of this bylaw is, don't make a final decision before you get more information and maybe have a chance to be able to comment on our proposal.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Dunst? Just one very quick one, hopefully. This is part of a rezoning for a commercial marina, right? I mean, this is not a private dock that you're talking about. And you're not talking about a community dock. You're talking about a commercial operation here. A major dock.
I would not call it a commercial operation, because a commercial operation would mean there is substantial moorage which generates income. The area is just too limited, too small to allow really moorage. It's a landing facility. Ideally, it should actually be built by the municipality or by the province. But it's not a marina.
Okay, fair enough. No, it's a landing facility.
Yes, landing facility.
Okay.
Docking.
Okay, good, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's it?
That's it.
That's
Good.
it.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Peter Frinton.
Once again, Peter Frinton, 741 Carter Road, a triple header tonight, and you guys are for me. My thinking on this has evolved, and there seems to be a number of problems. The very first, and I was looking through some of the definitions, but given the litigation that followed the dock crisis at Cape Roger Curtis, we're not really talking about docks, we're talking about wharves and floats and dock structures, but I think the wording needs to be very clear as to what it is that is being considered. Second thing that I have concern with is that there was to have been an inventory of all beaches on Bowen Island, And I think that Mr. Dunce's comments are absolutely salient, that, well, where is it and where is it not appropriate to be building wharf structures? And I think the principle underlying that is that you want to aggregate and minimize the number of structures which are built in the future. And a perfect example is Peters Island near Schwartz Bay, which looks like a porcupine because everybody has their own little dock. And you go, why, oh why, do they not do what they did on Savory Island, which is put one public facility? And it does divide the beach. We have examples closer in West Vancouver where you have 3 wharf structures which divide beaches. So I'm not sure that division of a beach, I think that actually impeding traffic, impeding pedestrian traffic, is maybe captures it better. But I think that the bigger thing is to say, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is where we can and cannot do it. So the third thing is I think that there has to be a differentiation between private and community use facilities. My introduction to Bowen Island was in 1960, and I landed at Seymour Bay. There was a full-on wharf there, and quite large Union steamships would tie up to it and disgorge their passengers. And I don't know the exact history of whether it just fell into disrepair or what it was, but it was a treasure of a facility. And again, Mr. Dunce has pointed out the need for that. I would augment that by referencing Mount Gardner Dock once again, that it needs to be maintained because it's of immense public utility. So I think that there should be a differentiation, that you may allow these things if there is a public benefit. And this is a blanket prohibition, which I don't think is a very good way of doing it as well. And then the final thing is that, again, referencing Mr. Dunce, in this case it was with not Seymour Bay, but with Pebbly Beach, that he made application to build a wharf and float. And the stipulation, he said, was it would continue. There used to be, in fact, seasonal floating floats in the area. And the kids all swam off that, and I used to swim off that.
Just a musical interlude.
Yeah.
That's good.
Reminding you about the hook that's coming in a second.
So he, in that case, in that particular application, there was to have been a public benefit, which was that he said there would be no gate on this, that the public would be, he wanted to moor his boat on one side, and he wanted to make it available as swimming floats. And the interesting thing was I supported that in principle, and then the outrage from the neighborhood was such that I went, oh, can't touch this with a 10-foot pole. So my counsel is that this be looked at more closely, and you really look at what your objectives are in passing this. And I would stay away from blanket prohibitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Murray.
So I'm going to be a double header today. Murray Atherton, 1477 Peter Road. Basically one question, I don't know if it's just for Daniel or for council, but we're wondering if there's such a thing as any kind of grandfathering clause in this proposal for existing floats and docks.
We aren't really here to answer your question.
No, I know.
However, I
Right.
will say, of course, we're not going to ask anybody to tear out a dock that already exists, obviously. We think it's obvious. This is for all, this is going forward, this is for the future.
Okay. And on that, a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of years ago, time goes quickly, I spoke at a public hearing on the docks at Cape Roger Curtis. and I expressed my own personal concern that the stopping the docks at Cape Roger Curtis was the start, and it was my personal fear that this would now go around the island, and there would be a banning of docks around the island. We are an island. There's emergency procedures that have to be taken only by water. And I'd hate to see this go through the way it's stated now. What is a beach? What is a dock? What is a float? What is a community? Is there a difference between a community amenity and a private one? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
We do have two more that have just signed up. We have Pippa Hamilton.
So Pippa Hamilton of 648 Cliff Road. So I just wanted to say that I would like to maybe reiterate some of the statements both Mr. Dunst, Mr. Brenton, and others. I think it's very critical to maybe reassess. I would like to see us or council rethink perhaps this bylaw. I concur that I think it's a little bit far-reaching, and I think that there's been some very interesting points about it being more targeted, about areas of concern. I in particular want to echo Mary Atherton's comments on the public safety and transportation side. I'm on the ESS committee, and I've also come from government, etc., and I'm particularly concerned about some of the longer term plans on the emergency support side. We have limitations on the island in terms of exiting off this island in the event of a significant fire or other things. And it's my understanding that the Seymour Bay facility was actually a government dock, like a federal government dock. And for longer term planning and shared funding initiatives, etc., those are investments of significant expense, and the public safety. I mean, I'm on the other side of that duck part. I have to say, I'm particularly concerned for those that are perhaps going to be cut off or might not have access to a quick exit. So I'm hopeful that the council will actually consider and look at the island as a whole, and as we, as a community, look at the different use case scenarios for different beaches and different areas, that perhaps there's a slightly, a little more time is taken to assess where and how perhaps some of the shared value scenarios can be considered. I think that one in particular has a history on the access side that could lend itself to some of our transportation needs on the pedestrian side. I think it's a very interesting initiative. I'm aware of that. But I am also concerned more so for the ability to be able to augment snug code in particular, and there's only a few places that can take place for mass exiting, etc. So, for that, plus just my hope that the wording and consideration of land use and respect for private and balancing private and public interests, that there's care and consideration taken. I would hope that a little more time is taken before, and I'd like to see a more targeted approach. So that's just 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we have Jen Lafferty. Please state your address.
1605 White Hills Drive. I figured since I'm here, I might as well speak. I think I echo most of the people that are here, and I feel like I have a unique position in that I'm actually relatively new to the island. So we're here about 4 years, and I don't feel like I have that history in the background. I can appreciate the passion that's gone into these bylaws and into the history of the docking issue. I'm looking at it more from a moving forward perspective, and that with this particular bylaw, it did seem to me that there was a lack of clarification, and that what seemed to have happened in the past was because the bylaws weren't very clear and it was open to interpretation. And that's where I think a lot of the problems that happened came from. And I personally, I'm part of the Tunstall Bay Club, and so I'm wondering how that's going to affect that dock I was writing my name down as I heard something about grandfathering. So I'm not sure if that's going to be taken into consideration. There is very, very limited access on the west side of the island for boating access, which I think, yeah, is very well pointed out that that's an emergency issue. We live on an island. We should have numerous public access, actually. It shouldn't be just through TBCA in terms of a private club. It should be a priority to be providing public access. And then also just the clarification of what divides a beach. I'm thinking in particular with Tenstall, there's one side and then the TBCA dock, and then at high tide, there's actually no continuous pathway for that dock. So I'd be curious to know if that's considered blocking a beach access, because at low tide, there's a straight line, but at high tide, there's a rock cliff blocking that. So where the clarification can come in on that type of situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So,
I have one more thing I forgot to mention. I did want to say that I actually think the concern about legal exposure is a really critical one. We have so many really expensive and very significantly important initiatives in our way, you know, as a community that we need to fund. The last thing we need to see the community be burdened with is additional legal bills that come from just this lack of clarity around private interest, public interest, etc. And I think that is such a critical piece for everyone, because our resources are always tight at the start of things. So.
Is it possible, I'm not written down anywhere signed up, but is it possible to say something?
yeah, please join us.
Okay, thank you.
State your name and address.
Wendy Seal Bakes, and I live at 529 Eves Road, on Vaughan. I'm not prepared to speak, and I'm not good at speaking, so bear with me. I just really need to respond to the people who are saying that there's no access on the west side of the island. I kayak up and down the west side. There is a proliferation of docks over there, and there's a whole lot at Roger Curtis. They are not public beaches. If there is an emergency, I am quite sure it would be possible to use those docks. Or at least one or two of them, get the people off. It would not be an issue. And I live at Sealy Park, near Sealy Park. I swim on that beach, and the dock and the boats are coming in, landing on the beach all summer long. That is a very easy beach to land a boat on. So you don't even need a dock. You may have already figured out that I really support this bylaw. I think we need to protect our foreshore, not just our beaches, but our foreshore. And I would like to see this bylaw passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening, I'm Richard Peoplestick from 1795 Emily Lane, and I'll make it very short. I support the bylaw completely. I had only some suggestions I submitted already in writing, and I wanted to state them here as well. This is the active community of small boaters, Bowen Islands, not just big boaters with docks. We have also a lot of kayakers and canoeists. And when point B of the proposed bylaw says we want to not impede pedestrians, I would like to add to that also, suggest to add to that also pedestrians and boaters of any kind. So we have a clear understanding that the beaches are there for public use at all time. And I also like to echo what Wendy said. We mustn't mix up things in terms of private enjoyment or public enjoyment. Beaches are public. Emergency procedures are a completely different ballgame, and that's what you have to think about in different discussions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, anyone else want to jump in?
Well, we can ask the planner questions, right? Can we ask
If you wish. But let's finish, let's do the public hearing portion of it first, okay? So, I'm calling for public input, written or verbal. Calling a second time for any further submissions, and calling a third and final time for any further submissions. Okay, there being no further submissions, we will now decide on the recommendation going forward. So Melanie, did you want to say something?
I just want to ask the planner a question. Public docks, is that prohibited within this new bylaw? We got community docks, private moored facilities, or group moorage.
So community dock is defined as, community dock means a public dock.
Anyone else? Oh, Gary.
Yeah, obviously my position hasn't changed on this. When they did it,
We're not here to
To discuss.
have a meeting. This is the public hearing, so if you have a question for Daniel, or if you want to move one of the recommendations, that's what would be appropriate at this time.
well, we had a discussion last time, I thought it was gonna be open. Okay, that's fine, no, it's withdrawn.
Okay, thanks. Sue Ellen?
I'll make the motion that all written and verbal submissions regarding bylaw number 466, 2018, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 466, 2018, up to and including October 1st, 2018, be received and that the public hearing be adjourned.
Seconded. Okay. All those in favor? And those opposed? Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you all. That concludes our business for today. Sorry, Jared.